Hello, welcome everybody to the Art of Shadaloo with Reyan Ali and Randy Vellacott. My name is Reyan. I am the writer of NBA Jam, the book, published by Boss Fight Books. And I am super excited to be joined by Randy Vellacott over here, who worked on the iconic, I'd say, 1994 Street Fighter movie. Just to give you a little bit of more background on Randy, he was the lead graphic designer on the film. And otherwise, if IMDb is to believe, if I can trust all the credits that I read and some of the bits and pieces on his bio, he's worked on Mission Impossible, not just the series, but on one of the films, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One with the
and then I've also got he's also worked on Captain America, The Hunger Games, several other films. Been in the business for over 30 years. He started as focusing on as a graphic designer and now does visual effects. Randy, thank you so much for joining us and for being game to talk about Street Fighter the movie. How are you?
Good, thank you.
It's really exciting to come back to and revisit all this because I'm one of the many people that grew up with Street Fighter the movie. Not just the film itself, but the action figures, the video game adaptation that came with it too. So a lot of the stuff over there, and it's just so iconic. I mean, like even the painting behind you evokes so many things immediately. Tell me a little bit about you. Let's get to know you a little bit. Aside from what I've mentioned, where were you in the industry when you started working on Street Fighter, rather before you started working on Street Fighter, and what were the kind of duties that you had on the movie?
Well, just brief rundown. I won't do a Mark Turmel and speak for 30 minutes.
There you go.
But
yes,
I sort of my education was engineering, architecture, and then art. And then afterwards, I worked in ad agencies. I was a set designer and scenic artist for a local theatre company. I did a lot of amateur productions as an actor. I worked for a sign company making signs. Worked for a typographic company who used to typeset. I did illustrations for books. Just before Street Fighter, I was a set designer for a local television station where I was also a producer for a kids cartoon hosting, in which I also was a co-host. And I also, the first graphical computer interface was a Quantel paint box, which they used for the news graphics. So I was sort of introduced to computer graphics in about 1986. So that was $1 million machine at the time. So it was pretty cutting edge. Then after that, I stopped working for the television stations for certain reasons. Mainly because they started taking their television programs from interstate rather than local. So local production dried up, so I figured I'd move on. I heard that there was something going on at the local movie studios. So Gold Coast Studios had just opened up. And so I rang them and they said, "Can you be down here in an hour?" So from that I did about 10, 20 paintings for a set. And then I became the scenic artist for the show as well. And then from that, I jumped to graphics on Mission Impossible. Because they were on the same lot, the two productions. So I just sort of walked in the door of another production and said, "I'm looking for some work. This show is closing down." And so that's how I got started on Mission Impossible. So, I mean, I have the grounding in set design, typography, sign making. So it was a pretty good grounding for all of the work that I did. And then from there, I did a season of Mission Impossible. So that's 22 episodes. And then from that, jumped on to Time Tracks, if anyone remembers that. The very old sci-fi sort of program. Did a couple of movies of the weeks as a graphic designer. So that would be about where it was up to Street Fighter. So I just finished Time Tracks. And I suppose of interest to the fans would be that I was using an Amiga computer to do the graphics. So I bought it's pretty cutting edge, and I think I bought it in 91, 92 to do Time Tracks. So it was an Amiga 4000, which I thought was pretty splendiferous for the day. And without it, the graphics just wouldn't have been done. So I suppose being on the lot, having worked on all of these productions, when it came to essentially crewing up Street Fighter, they essentially sourced all of their crew from the local crews. So all the set dressers, the art directors, the drafts people, they're all local, and they're all essentially crew from Time Tracks. So it was handy for the lot that they had this entire crew essentially sitting there. They just finished a show. They just all move on over.
Ready for more. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I love the journey of the different careers over there and all these different pieces that led to something like this. Now, how about Street Fighter as a video game? Were you ever a fan of video games, or at least familiar with Street Fighter before the project came along? What did you know about this? Because it was a pretty big pop cultural phenomenon in the early 90s, but it's also focused more on arcades and for people that were really playing consoles at the time.
I wasn't a Street Fighter player. I mean, as you can tell, I was super busy these shows, like working hours on something like Time Tracks production. That's a 12-hour day standard, and then art department's usually 15. And my working days were more like 18 hours a day, so it didn't really get a lot of time for.
Didn't lend itself to that.
But before that, I mean, I go back to Space Invaders. I think my first computer game was called Luna, which was a terminal game. So when I did engineering, Luna was this thing where you just type in how far you are from the moon's surface and what thrust you want, and then you try to land your little lunar lander. So that was my first computer game. And that Pong had just come out, so you would go down to the refectory and play Pong. But when I was working in the late 70s, early 80s, I was a Missile Command.
A classic, absolutely classic. There's a book
Galaxian.
about Missile Command out there now too.
Yeah, Galaxian and Galaga. So the Missile Command was the arcade, and I loved it because it had the big scroll ball. But in my lunch hours at the graphic design house, I would go to the local eatery, and they'd have the little sit-down tables, and I'd just play it non-stop for about half an hour before in my lunch break. So that was my big break, playing Galaga, Super Galaxian.
Yeah. Now, so let's say taking me back to the origin of your work on Street Fighter, what were you looking to for inspiration? Like, were you going in and referencing any of the game materials or any of things like box art or the actual games themselves? What'd you use to build the aesthetic for the film when it was just in the early conceptual stage?
Some of that material would have been available to the production designer, so I would have got all my cues from the production designer. I didn't know the game whatsoever, except to know that it was a big thing at the time. So my cues were all from the production designer. So he would have come out, might have showed some images of Bison. I do not remember it. I do remember, because I still have the graphic, I did a literal Bison logo of a bison.
Oh, did
so obviously
you really?
That got quickly rejected. And I think we were shown an original image of Bison logo, which was a skull, but the wings came straight out, sort of sculptural 3D, the gold badge. From that, I don't know, I'm very simple, a simple man, and so in simplifying graphics, I like something that's easily seen and recognized. So when you're working in television, normally your graphics are seen for less than a second or two at a time. So if you're making, so usually the setup is you have a series. So in an episode, you'll have a bad guy, a good guy, maybe some police, maybe a hospital. Each one of those has to have a graphic, and each one essentially has an establishing shot, and that's it. And it'll be 2 seconds, and then the audience gets the idea. That's the hospital, that's the bad guy, that's the good guy. So all your graphics normally are only seen very sparsely, and you have to punch in and grab the audience, and it has to be instantly recognizable. So I was sort of going along the same lines for this. Little did I know they would be plastered everywhere. You cannot watch a frame. You cannot watch a frame in the movie without seeing something. It's like the AN logos are there by the thousands. So I was used to a television show where I did everything. So you would have an episode, you'd have 2 weeks to plan it. I would hand cut all of the signage. I would have to source it, design it, reference it, get the materials, put it on set, all by myself. So the difference between a television show and this movie, which was my first big movie, was that I just did the designs and went, here you go. And then magically it just got dispersed. So when I joined the production, they'd already started on the set. Well, it was 3/4 finished by the time I crewed up. It was astounding. Just walked into this cavernous football stadium sized set that was supposed to be the inside of the temple. So you had these huge mega structures holding the roof up, and then all of this corrugated iron across the ceiling to stop all of the debris and the earthworks from falling down on everyone. So that main set held 5 or 6 sets. So there was the main area with the screens, then there was the dungeon area with the pit where everyone falls down and the blades pop up. Down underneath that pit was not just a hole for the set, it actually was a working set, and that was a dungeon where Honda gets whipped. It was all set in a huge pool, so there was a water pool built into the set, so going underground. So then underneath there was built that set, and then at the very western end of the set was Bisonopolis and the Bisonopolis city, and then joining that were all the corridors that you would later see people running up and down in. So it was a huge set and very impressive. But so I came into it there, and they were shooting they were prepping shoot for Thailand. And so instantly I was stuck in a little room, and it was, you have to design a Shadaloo logo, you have to design the United Nations logo, you have to design all the signage for the sets. So really it was just head down. I think the biggest stumble was the Bison logo. After that, everything that I designed essentially was, that's it, approved. move on. So I think there was the GNT logo, there was an SNS logo for a local television show, KROV 19 was another television show, another television news broadcast. So all of those had to be designed, and obviously the Allied Nations. The Shadaloo font, which was the Thai font. So I designed 3 of those. 2 sort of soft round ones like Thai, and 1 very angular, a bit more like Bison, supposedly to use in his fort, I suppose. Got used on a few things. So that was the main thrust of it. It was just getting all of this stuff done so that stuff could be churned out for Thailand. So I was pretty busy, and I worked in a little tiny room. I think it was a makeup room. It had a little bench on it. Stuck my computer gear on. I think I had a Amiga 4000. I bought a bubble jet, Canon bubble jet printer, cutting edge. Cost me $1,500. Bought it myself, not through the production. Many years later, the art director said, "No, you shouldn't have done that. We had tons of money." But at the time, I was just so in awe of working on this production. I just went, I've got to do the best I can by this.
You get the best
which
tools.
also ties into the making of the money, which I'll come to later. But yeah, so the setup was, I'm not really sure where the inspiration for the logos came. Obviously, it was the original skull and wings, but I've been looking at the movie again, revisiting it, trying to remember everything. And when I look at it now, to me, it evokes the swastika. So it's sort of like a pirate flag and a swastika rolled into one, and it sort of instantly hits you.
Right.
Another thing I noticed is that the Bisonopolis font, where he stands in front of Bisonopolis and gives his little speech about not being evil, that font almost mirrors the slope of the wings. So when you're looking at it, there's all this lovely thrusting visuals. He's standing there with his hat and the ornament on the top of it, and it's sort of spreading, and then all the Bisonopolis fonts are all sloping off in that direction. And to me, the wings sort of look like little Heil Hitler hands. So the whole thing to me evokes like Nazi Germany. And apparently, apparently Raoul had done a lot of research into the movie, and he also based a lot of his movements, hand movements, speech movements, on dictators. And so he'd done research on Hitler and Mussolini. So we were sort of at tangents, going along the same lines, trying to evoke the same imagery. So I thought that was sort of interesting.
Yeah.
Although I never actually met Raoul on set. I think he was very ill, and he would have been in makeup for very long periods of time. Unfortunate. I would have liked to have met him, but that happens. It was a big crew, big cast.
Now, what appealed to you particularly about the Bison character that, has brought so much inspiration? Now, granted, you're making these things based on the specific needs of the movie, but it feels like M. Bison in particular is like, just the image behind you, the Bison dollars, the Shadaloo logo, all of this stuff seems especially evocative and especially on point. What did you find particularly interesting or engaging about M. Bison, or did you find anything to like about him as a character?
I love Raoul's performance. I I didn't get to set much, but I did get to set on the day that he was doing his boudoir scene, mainly because I'd done 2 of the paintings for it. So I did that one, and I also did the clown painting. And I did 3 magazines. So when he's doing his speech, they pick up a World Review magazine. I can't remember. Underneath it, there are another 3 magazines, one of which was later used in the what is it, this where the guard is holding a girly magazine. So when Bison or Chun-Li picks up, I think Chun-Li picks up the magazine, and it's a World Review. At the very bottom of the stack is a girly magazine. So there's a little Easter egg.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's interesting that they put that on set there and then reused it later on. But that was a bit of a hero prop, which I still have.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what's behind you. That great image of Bison on the horse, which of course is just so familiar. And the name of the famous painting is Napoleon Crossing the Alps. That it has that great resemblance to. Tell me about the genesis of that. Was this something that was brought to you to say you need to create a specific painting of Bison on the horse, or was the order pretty much we need something that shows how powerful M. Bison is, or that cult of personality he wants to cultivate? Where did that painting come from?
It came from a page torn out of a magazine, which I still have, and that was the reference. They said, paint that. So D'Souza and Bill Creeber have a really good sense of humor. So a lot of the jokes in the movie are through them. I mean, D'Souza has these little Easter eggs everywhere, sly jokes. Obviously, the dialogue is very camp, but everything is sort of hidden. Like the language in Shadaloo was Esperanto. So all of the signage, or most of the signage you see in Urbo Shadaloo City, is Esperanto. And then on top of that, you've got it written in a Thai English font. Now, I don't remember there being a Thai English font at the time, so I think I might have been one of the first people to make one. I'm not going to take that accolade, but I don't remember any now. I think I can find them now, and they're called Pad Thai fonts. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I've lost my stream of thought.
Yeah, no. Well, how about the logo behind you? How about that Shadaloo logo? You mentioned the genesis of it. How about the idea that it's still being used and it's become a part of Street Fighter lore beyond the movies? Is that something you ever anticipated? Anything like that ever happening?
Is it still being used?
It's at least it's within bits of the fan base. They still use that as the Shadaloo logo, or that's recognized enough that you Google Shadaloo logo, that inspiration lives on so much that it's shared within fan wikis and things like that.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that different from the original logo, which essentially is the skull and wings. I mean, I think the only thing that elevates it is the angle of the wings, and that it's a little bit more graphic than the 3D logo. Now, the 3D logo is not mine. That was taken by a props designer called Jeff Thorpe, and so he designed, I suppose, the light fittings that look very deco with the gold wings, the skull logo on the cap, and also it looks like they've taken the skulls for the clasp that holds the cloak together. Mm. There's little things like swizzle sticks in the boudoir that have the Bison logo on top. I mean, it's a lot of little subtle,
a lot of detail
things throughout the movie. I mean, I suppose it builds an environment. it builds. The more you have, the more interesting things there are. The more it feels like a real environment rather than a set. But yeah, to me it was just I didn't know who Bison was. I was just given the logo and just thought, what can I do to make this stylized and interesting for the production? So I didn't need his character, I suppose, apart from knowing that he wanted to be a dictator, rule the world.
Right.
But yeah, going back to his performance, I was about 2 meters behind the painting for the whole scene, for the whole day. I was just sitting there hearing them go over the lines over and over and over and over again. It's like it sticks in my mind. I mean, one of the few things it does. Most of the production is just a blur of having to produce stuff. So I don't remember a lot of it. Taking a line from the movie. Sorry, I don't remember any of it, but I do remember a little bit of it.
Right.
Yeah, I love Raul Julia. It's just absolutely stunning performance to be there on set listening to him.
Yeah, such a talent. And I mean, there's so much that goes with that too, is that, his presence, of course, lives on with the movie, and then there's the Bison Dollars themselves, which I want to get into. I'd be remiss to not mention these Bison Dollars.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the genesis of that.
The Bison Dollars were, you just need to produce some money, essentially. So it was a difficult thing to do, and I was never really happy with the Bison Dollars. So I'm a tad upset that it's become famous because I was never really happy with the quality of it. A lot of technical restrictions that now that computers have advanced, later on, I improved upon the techniques to make money. So later money that I made actually looks like real money. This, to me, looks like cartoon money. So maybe that's part of the fun of the style of it. But essentially, I was told, make some money. And so I was given a photographic portrait of Raul, which is also used for the painting. So that was the inspiration for the graphic. For the face on the money. Obviously, there's the Shadaloo base in the background. So I've just taken the elements of Bison, his portrait, the Shadaloo logo, the Shadaloo fortress, and then I just needed a background. So I've taken it and then I've made like a dot matrix background of the Shadaloo logo. So the whole background is made up of white skulls on red, red skulls on white. And the color and look of it is essentially based on a, let's see if I can find it.
Oh, there we go.
So
that's fantastic.
I sort of put the colouring of a local $20 note. So Australia has interesting plastic money that is quite colourful. So I've taken that design, sort of, and just reproduced it for the money. The colour essentially, which was just a red base of something indiscernible. But the technical limitations were the bubble jet printer was 360 by 360, and so the image that came out of it was very dotty. But a lot of the signage that I did couldn't really be printed out because it's just so low quality. So what I did was the print is offset print. So 2 plates have been sent to the printer, 1 black, 1 for the red. And for the black, so for the red one was a straight out print from the bubble jet because it only needed to be low quality. And the dots were actually quite helpful in style. But the black plate couldn't really get the resolution that I required. So I did a big piece of art, obviously with the pen work, and then reduced it on a photocopier. So in my searching for this video conference, I actually found the photocopies.
You're kidding me. That's amazing.
I don't have the original artwork, but these are the 2 size. So I found about 10 of them. These are the 2 size artworks. And what I've done was, with a photocopier, you can increase the darkness. So the ones that I have are the rejects, where the print was too light and you could barely read the text. So I've done a variety of different contrasts and darknesses and picked the best one for the print. So I have essentially the original art for the black plate, and
oh boy,
this was the original mock-up for the production designer. So photocopies were printed out of this and cut up to show the production designer for approval. They've yellowed a bit, but they are the original bubble jet red plate, and then on top of it, I've run it through a photocopier to put the black image over the top of that print, and then I've cut out Raul Julia and then stuck that over to finish it off. So underneath all of that is the an original plate, so I can take them off if I want and reproduce an original plates again. Unfortunately, I don't have the original, but I have all of the pieces that made the money in the first place, if the fans are interested.
Oh yeah. This, I mean, Bison Dollars in particular, there are so many things about the Street Fighter movie that people still look back and enjoy. Raul Julia's amazing line delivery being one of them. But then also, you know, with Bison Dollars, they've really taken on a life of their own. You know, off the top of my head, I'm thinking about a Twitter account that you can ask how much is that in Bison Dollars, and then whomever manages this Twitter account will answer for you. You know, you can say so and so American, how much is that in Bison Dollars? Somebody's come up with a whole little conversion rate for Bison Dollars, and there's this whole like cult following for it. You know, I've even seen things about there being a limited number of Bison Dollars out there in the world, something like 2,000, and then of course the value increases. What is your whole take on the life that these things have taken on?
Well, that's interesting. It's a bit like Bitcoin. There is a limited
yes, exactly. Amount. Yes, yeah.
But if anyone's interested in Bitcoin, I've made up this little keeper.
Oh. This is beautiful. Oh wow, that and in Bison's world, that makes you a very rich man.
Well, I don't know about that, but I have about 200 of them. I know that people think they're precious, but I actually have a couple that I've lost. I've taken them out to scan them, put them down somewhere. They've disappeared, so I've lost a fortune. But yeah, so that was my little stack, and that had been in a lockup it wasn't even kept in anything decent. It was just thrown into a little box, and it had all curled up in heat somewhere. Yeah. So I've swapped them all out since then, but I didn't really think much of them. I should have kept more. I mean, I had thousands of them printed, enough to fill that ammo box that they bring into the circus tent. So an awful lot printed. I don't know what happened to them.
Is this cult following of the Bison Dollar, does this surprise you, or does that seem pretty apropos considering how the movie's remembered in other ways?
It surprises me because like I say, I wasn't really ever that happy with it.
Right. Yeah.
So that it is famous is sort of good and bad. Like, do I really want to be famous for a piece of art that I'm not really that happy with? But
it happens sometimes like
life.
That. Yeah. I think it's like when a band get famous for a certain song and then they want them to play that song over and over, even though they've played like that isn't their favorite song. They've worked on other things, but sometimes something just sticks out.
Yeah, I watched the chat you had with the arcade game makers, and how they talk about when they're doing the videos, it just is what it is, and they try to do their best, but what it turns out like may not have been what they totally envisaged, but once it's stamped, that's it forever.
That's it.
And that's what the fans remember. They don't remember the fact that you could have done better or it could have been different. It is just is what it is.
That is very true. Scarlet Sprites has a great question over here in the chat. He asks, does the original Bison logo you designed incorporating an actual bison still exist anywhere? I'd love to see this. I'd love to see it too. Is this around anywhere or is it lost to time?
The feed started while you were saying that, so I didn't hear it correctly.
Yeah, let me just repeat that real quick. Yeah, so this is from Scarlet Sprites over in the chat. He asks, does the original Bison logo you designed incorporating an actual bison still exist anywhere? I'd love to see this.
The logo design, I had
the one that you originally made of an actual bison that got rejected quickly when you found out who a bison was. Do you still have that someplace?
Yeah, I had it as an EPS file. So as you can imagine, the Amiga was an old format. It used to use a really weird format called D2R2 or something. I used to call it R2D2. It was IFF D2R2, I think. And they were kept on floppies or on my hard disk. I gave my Amiga to an the head of IT of one of the companies I worked for, because I didn't need it anymore. So those files sort of disappeared. But I did dredge up about 10. So I have the original Bison logo that I designed. I have the actual Bison Shadaloo one that you see on the wall. I found the partial GNT logo, and that's about it. If you want to go to my TeePublic site, I've reproduced a lot of the logos. So I've reproduced the Shadaloo Skull one. I've got the Allied Nations logo and the AN stencil. So if anyone is really that fanatic about it, they can buy a T-shirt.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit more towards the end.
If you're interested in that Bison logo, I can put it up.
Absolutely. There's diehard fans like me. There's people out there that are just like, anything that they can see, even the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, that always has more insight on something, and always, that'll maybe not evoke a memory, but it'll also have, you have that interest in knowing what is that thing, what did that Bison logo look like. So I would love to see that.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll put it up somewhere. It won't. No one will buy it, but I'll put it up on the TeePublic site.
Put it up there. You never know. You never know. These us video game fans, we do the love manifests in interesting ways.
There are. If you want those sort of behind the scenes things, they're written into the set. So there's into the production. So if you want Easter eggs, I've put a link to a blog where I've gone through the movie and I've indicated where the graphics turn up. Now, obviously, they turn up over and over again, but I've tried to just put in when the graphics first appear and rather than when they reoccur. But that list shows at least 10 or 20 Easter eggs. So in the cage fight, all of the signage which is in Esperanto and Thai script, they're holding up signs like "I love Vega." But one of the first signs that appears is "Hi Mum." And there's another one which says John 13:12, I think. So it says Johann 3:12. So that's a quote from the Bible, "For God so loved the world." Another one where Ryu is just about to fight. Just over his shoulder on the back wall, there's a Coca-Cola sign in Thai. Unfortunately, it's rather vague, but at the time it was a big deal trying to get Coke to do a sign in a foreign language. So we got approval for that. So there's that. And then all of the big signs that are scrawled across the back walls are all beer logos. So they're all advertising beer. And I did a lot of beer labels and a lot of beer labels for cans as well as the signage. So up on the back wall there, it sort of says beer juice on the sign in the back wall. It sort of says Gangalo Suko. Suko's juice, and Gangalo is like a brand name for a beer. So it actually says beer juice, and then a lot of the signage around there is for beer.
Okay.
So they're interesting things. And later on, there's some signage in the fort, which is quite interesting. The last sign when they're all exiting before, at the end, when they're being chased out, and they open the door and there's a switch and there's a sign on the wall. It says, "Exit, last door, last man out, turn off the lights." So that's the sort of thing that's an in-joke that no one would ever have picked up that I would know of. Another one when they're fighting in the changing room and he throws him up against the incinerator. It just sort of says, "Attention, incinerator, be careful." I would have liked to have put, "Be careful, it's hot," but the joke evaded me at the time. I've since redone the graphic, but so I've done those signs as well, which is sort of interesting. I love that sign, like "Last man out, turn out the lights." So there's all these little things that the director and or production designer have asked to put in. And I'm not even sure if they asked, because by that time you're sort of on a vibe with the director. You sort of knew what he would like. So I'm not sure if he asked for that signage or whether I thought it was a good joke myself to put up there that no one would notice.
Yeah.
Now, but it is remarkable how much extra time he had, even though he was directing. One of the things I wished I had was he asked for a booklet to be printed out for the entire crew. So it was in Esperanto. So he wrote the script and it gave the backstory of Bison and Shadaloo. So that was handed out to the entire crew, cast and crew. So there must be a few versions of those around if someone wants to search for them. That was quite interesting.
All these little details are fascinating. Thinking all these things that go into a movie that you might, like you said at the top of our call, is that, you know, they might just be on screen for a second, you know, 2 seconds. They're going to be here, then be gone, something to establish something. But, you know, putting all that work in, that leads to these great Easter eggs like this, things that we can discuss and learn about all these years later.
Yeah, it's not as good as the original Blade Runner, but the original sets on Blade Runner, the graphic designers put thousands of cues that you never see into the background. And they just make that environment seem more real. The more texture you can apply to a scene, to a shot, gives it a lived-in experience, lived-in feeling. So I'm happy that some of it was noticed anyway. A bit like my no smoking sign at the back there. I don't think it ever got seen. But there are things like that around the set. I think one of the things that didn't get seen much was the beer labels. I mean, I must have printed out thousands to go on cans, but I couldn't find any drinks. The large fabric signs you can see. Another thing that didn't get seen was much anyway, was in the interior of the Bison Fort, there are triangles on the walls. They had interchangeable panels that were supposed to be color-coded so that when they had the big chase fight sequence at the end, they could run down different corridors and it would appear that they were in a different place in the fort. Trying to extend it. I mean, they literally had one corridor that they were going to do all the scenes in, so that was meant to be a key to show you were in a different place. That never really went anywhere. I think you only ever see the triangles in 2 places. So one in Bisonopolis model room and one where they take the prisoners out, and there's a big sliding door with a triangle on the front.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Raul Julia earlier, that the memory of, you know, standing behind that painting, listening to him deliver his lines, as being something that, you know, still sticks with you. Were there any other real vivid memories from the set that still come to mind? I imagine it was very frantic as you were working, and there's all this stuff to do, and, you know, all these moving parts. But is there anything else that really jumps to mind where you say this was one of my most vivid or intriguing memories from working on the Street Fighter set?
I did get to shake hands with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
You did?
When I was showing the painting, he was in the room and he congratulated me, sort of said, "Nice job," shook my hand. So that's not too bad. The only other time I came across him was going to set. He came through one of the studio doors rather quickly with his entourage behind him, his guards, and he nearly bowled me over. And I think he's like patted me down and said, apologized for nearly knocking me over. So those were the 2 occasions I've met Jean-Claude. It was quite nice, even though apparently he was drugged up most of the time, but he was always very nice to me on the 2 occasions that I met him. The other times on the set, I remember my son was about 1 year old. So I brought the family around to tour around the set. Didn't usually get much time to do that, so I took them through the changing room set with the big Japanese print painting on the wall. That was just an awesome set. You could walk from that into the passageway up to the top of the fort. It was like you were in an underground cave. Just absolutely fantastic set. The scenic artists on that did a remarkable job. And then as well as that, there was a very narrow corridor, which I don't think was ever seen in the show, which was like you were in a pyramid, and it was very closed off. You felt very claustrophobic, and it went down at like almost a 45-degree angle. And I just remember walking through it thinking that I was like in a pyramid. And it's just the set design, the set finishing were all just remarkable. There were a whole lot of underground sets as well. I think where Guile goes down the shaft and he's trying to get into the fort. There was a whole continuation that they never of sets which were made, which never got shot, unfortunately, for time reasons. They were running out of time on the production. I remember touring them, thinking how beautiful they were. Of interest might be the fact that they rebuilt the square from Shadaloo City in a studio. They ran out of time in Thailand, had to do pickup shots. So they rebuilt the van in Australia because they couldn't get the GNT van over. They rebuilt the entire street scene from Thailand to do pickup shots. That was pretty remarkable. I know there are documentaries about the making of it and what a shambles it appeared in places, but I think Thailand shooting didn't go particularly well. They didn't get a lot of what they needed. I might have put it down to, I mean, this is only my feeling, but in the original scene where Chun-Li is doing the reporting, there was a master take which I thought was going to be in the movie, and it shows Chun-Li starting out doing the production, doing the TV reporting, and then Guile comes up. So this is all in one take, and so it took about 10 minutes. So it followed Chun-Li, and then she walked to Guile, then had an interview with Guile, then Guile left and walked somewhere else, and then the camera followed either Chun-Li or... So there was just this remarkable shot that I thought was going to be in the movie because it was showed to all of us back at the studio. But then when the movie came out, it was all chop, 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 cut up. And so I was thinking that this setup, which was like 10 minutes long, involved all of the hundreds of AN forces, Guile, Chun-Li, all of the extras. The setup for that one shot would have taken days, like a week to do and film perfectly. So I'm wondering if maybe his trying to get this perfect shot might have set back production a bit rather than just shooting the scenes and pick up shots when required. Just my thought, but there's another thing out there for fans to look for. There is a master cut of the entire scene of Chun-Li in Shadaloo City. Don't know if it still exists, but it was a remarkable thing. It was like Children of Men, you know, the long shots,
right.
Children of Men. That's what it was. Exactly the same thing. It was just a remarkable shot. Other things, I remember seeing Raul Julia doing a final dance with his wife. So that was the last time I would have seen Raul Julia, most people. So at the end of the night, he got up, remarkable dancer, just fantastic. I also remember E. Honda nearly flattening my child. So I'd taken him to it was sort of like a dinner party come dance venue. And my son was just a toddler, and could crawl, but he's a very adventurous young lad. So he went out to the dance floor, and as he was going out to the dance floor, Honda was like backing up and almost stood on him. So I don't know if my son will ever use that anecdote. He wouldn't remember it.
That's a pretty good anecdote, though. Yeah.
It was, yeah.
It's a nice icebreaker.
Almost finished his life there and then. It's a big boy to stand on you. But he was a lovely man as well. So he was very apologetic and said sorry. It wasn't his fault. It's my son being a bit adventurous.
Yeah. So looking at the finished product, take me back to your first reactions to it. 1994 when it comes out. What did you think of Street Fighter? Did you think that it was going to have substantial box office success, not have substantial box office success, become a cult hit, now become a cult hit, fly under the radar? What did you think that was going to happen with it?
Went to a screening, or I went to it when it first came out. I'm not sure which, and not that impressed. Sorry, Jean-Claude is not the best English speaker or actor, and so I couldn't see him carrying the movie. Raul Julia, yes. Sagat, yes. Very good actors. A lot of the characters in it, very good casting. But Jean-Claude wasn't that impressed with it. My first impression when seeing it was the logo at the beginning with the horns, and I thought, what is that logo? I could imagine a lightning bolt, because it's on the skull, sort of going down through the globe, but they took that lightning bolt, and then instead of taking it straight through, they put it like horns. So that was my first impression when I went to the movies, was a graphic one. It's like, why did they do that graphic?
All right, what's going on there?
Then the next was the expecting to see this long shot, which got cut up. So that was my next experience. Then after that, it was Jean-Claude really can't carry lines very well. So my impression was bits are really interesting. Some of the characters were great. Some of the performances were great. But I didn't think it would do that well. I know that it made a profit. It didn't make a fantastic profit, but it made a healthy profit. And I think they were going to do a sequel. Obviously, at the end, there is the resurrection of Bison. So there's the possibility that he was going to do the next movie. But obviously, with him dying, that put paid to any sequels. He was resurrected many years later, but not. It was sort of like an alternative universe take of it. I think in the 90s there was one made. I haven't seen it, but I did see it listed on IMDb.
Now, how about your personal favorite scene? Do you have a personal favorite scene or line in the movie, something that not even necessarily, connected to you professionally, but you just enjoy as a watcher, or something that always makes you laugh?
You got paid?
That's a classic. The line about the Tuesday, I love that one. Me was only Tuesday.
Yeah. Well, I'd heard that about 1,000 times, so I suppose it didn't really make an impression on me. I hadn't heard the line. Yeah, you got paid. I don't often laugh at movies. I think I might have given it a chuckle at that. Instantly, that stands out. Also, what stands out is I was amazed at the scene in the boudoir at how often the painting was in the background. It was like they used the painting as the backdrop rather than the set. So I was very chuffed that it got so much screen time. I don't think I've ever had so much screen time in a movie as this one. Like for everything, for this painting, for the graphics, they're everywhere. So that's quite remarkable. Look, there are some very memorable scenes. I mean, one-liners. Was Arnie doing one-liners at this point?
At that point, he would probably have been moving a little bit away from them. But those one-liners, they were still out there, those movies. But I imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger was going in a little bit of a different direction by that point, by '94.
I mean, D'Souza is supposedly one of the biggest grossing box office screenwriters ever. So, I mean, you'd expect some of the dialogue to at least be reasonable quality or Hollywood quality. Makes money. It's sort of funny. It's tongue-in-cheek. He has all of those qualities, as a writer. So you'd have to expect some of it. I just thought it was let down by some of the performances. Some of the extras and the bit parts were abominable. Almost not worth, like turn away cringe. They can't.
I appreciate your candor. Yeah.
Sawada, I think at the beginning, he gets up and makes a speech about how they can't attack. And it's just like he can barely deliver the lines. It was embarrassing. I can see as a piece of pop art that's amusing. Maybe it's almost done on purpose, funny, but to me it was just like poor delivery and a bit embarrassing. But once again, once it's printed and it becomes the universe's property, it changes character depending on who's watching it. So one
Absolutely.
person's B-grade movie is another person's piece of art, piece of cinema history.
Yes. Now, coming to Street Fighter all these years later, are you surprised that, considering that, it turned a profit at the time, but never had that sequel, and it had, all of these campy elements and Jean-Claude Van Damme and that lead role, which I'd agree with you, probably not the best person to be Guile. What's your impression of the response that it's gotten? As in, were you expecting any of this cult fan base or any of this to survive all these years later, as it has past that initial period when the movie came out and it made its impact?
I mean, you obviously see a fan base that I don't. I mean, I work in a totally different environment and I'm away from games. I only see peripheral interest in the movie. I know there's some interest because people have been stealing my artwork, but
that's when you know. That's when you really know.
I put it up on that randoir.com, and some fans asked for some better artwork, so I put some hidden on the site. But then it ended up being sold, so someone's taken it and then started making T-shirts. So I found that out and thought, well, I'll sell them myself. So I put the art up. I mean, for many years, I thought, well, I don't really have the copyright on them. I mean, it's made for the movie, so if anyone owns the copyright of the image, it'll be Capcom. But I contacted Capcom and they said, no, it had nothing to do with them. It was a local production thing. And I think the local production, if there was a production company, closed down years ago, or it was only set up for this movie. As it was, I didn't sign the contract at the time.
Hey, there you go. There you go. Plausible deniability too.
I was still employed by them, and I still thought
absolutely
that
you have the connection.
I don't really own it, and I really didn't have a good copy of it. I eventually found some old negs that I'd taken at the time, and I had them professionally drum scanned and so as higher quality as I could. It took me about 2 weeks of touch up to get the painting back to a reasonable standard, and improved, because the original painting, the canvas had a seam running, like a joint canvas seam running down the center of the painting. So for the print, I removed that and just generally cleaned up and took out the texture of the canvas so that when it was reapplied over canvas, it would look good. So as you can see, it doesn't look too bad. This is like a 3/4 size copy of the print. But, you know, when you say there's a fan base, I've sold 4 of them of this size to people who have gone to that site. So, I mean, there's not a huge demand for it. Few people have bought the T-shirts. Not many. So, to me, it's sort of interesting more than anything. So I've put it out there, and it's interesting to see, as a barometer, what the market is or what the interest is in the movie. And also, I thought it was going to die a death, and at least now the image is out there, so I don't have long on the earth. So it's good that I've got something to survive me anyway.
Exactly, and it'll stay forever. Yeah, you're the work you leave behind, Bison Dollars, among other things, Bison Dollars and Bison on a Horse. Now, so you mentioned randwar.com, RANDWAR.com, and you're selling prints over there, shirts over there. What else are you up to nowadays, or what else do you have going on?
Well, obviously, since Street Fighter was one of the first big movies and last that I did as a graphic artist. So I've worked on some local shows and television productions as a graphic artist, but I moved on about 2 years later into visual effects. So since about 96, I've essentially been a digital matte painter and compositor with forays into VFX supervision. So my one award in my life is the an AFI award for the visual effects for a movie called Daybreakers, which was sort of a vampire film with Ethan Hawke and Willem Dafoe. So it had some big name people in it. Sam Neill as well, as a sort of a local guy. I also did some supervision on some TV shows and mini-series. Journey to the Center of the Earth was a sort of a locally made sci-fi mini-series. But apart from that, it's mostly been compositing. So obviously, if you have the list, you've seen the list. So, you know, Superman Returns, Mission Impossible, Hunger Games, Captain America. A lot of those were like just small bits of the movie. I mean, as a compositor, you can work on 10 shots in a movie or 60 shots, as in Superman Returns. So I was sort of lead compositor on that and had a lot of shots. And many companies work on these movies. So I think 3 big vendors worked on Superman Returns, and the company I worked for produced about a third of the shots for the movie. So that was a big deal for me. Hunger Games, you'll remember the shot where they're coming in the carriages down the long colonnade. So I did that sequence. So all of the long shots where they're coming towards the camera where they come to a halt in front of the president. So I did composited those shots. So that was my little sequence. So that's it. So when the movies come up, I get a call and I don't get the call much anymore. I mean, I haven't really worked for the last 2 years. Obviously, COVID has stopped a lot of work. I mean, here we don't have a lot of local production companies, so I would and move to Melbourne or Sydney to do the shots, but because we had all of our borders closed, couldn't go anywhere, and obviously no local production.
Right.
So sort of put a bit of a stop. Last thing I did was an ad about a week before COVID closed everything down, and that was a local insurance company ad. It was a very grand ad with thousands of extras that had to be cloned, but yeah, sort of what I've been doing. So, totally different environment. I don't design graphics. I did matte painting for a while, digital matte painting. There was a movie called Winchester where we had to extend a house. In America, there's this house that supposedly is haunted, and the heir to the Winchester fortune just kept building rooms onto it, thinking she'd trap ghosts in the rooms. She'd make stairways go to nowhere and put locks on the doors. And they obviously couldn't shoot at the original because it's sort of a tourist attraction. They took it as a cue, built the first floor of it over here, and then we extended it up another floor with extensions to it. And there's also a scene in San Francisco which had to be recreated. So I did a matte painting of San Francisco circa 1907, just before the earthquake. So that's my life. I mean,
you've been busy. Yeah.
Yeah. My IMDb makes it look like I have been busy. I think I've got about 80 productions, somewhere along that line. So
Great.
A bit too many to name. Some of them are small, some of them are big.
Now, final thing I just wanted to ask was, overall looking back through, your time working on Street Fighter, the cult phenomena that's happened with it afterward in terms of fans remembering it, the fact that we're having this conversation all these years later about it, what do you look back at Street Fighter with, or what kind of feelings do you look back at it with? Is it, mostly, is it love and positivity? Is it sort of like this was a professional milestone because it's well remembered, or because it gave you the opportunities to have your work on display over there? Ultimately, when you look at Street Fighter and think about it, what are your feelings on the whole project and your role in it?
Awe-inspiring at the time, and still just so lucky to have worked on the production. The production designer, Bill Creever, just an awesome talent, as was and I had a lot to do with him. So he's just a wonderful man. Ran a very good team. The director of photography was an awesome talent as well. William Fraker. I think there were two Bills, so there's William Creever and William Fraker. They were both Bills, but both of them have an enormous resume. And I think that because D'Souza had never really directed before, I think he'd made one little directorial start, that they put these Goliaths on the production to steer him through. And, the photography on it is remarkable as well. You look at this, and the beauty of these movies is they're a team. And I love working with teams of talented people. As it was, I'll mention Jacinta Leon, who is also credited as a graphic artist on Street Fighter. She mainly was a drafts person and did the Invisiboat, and so she drafted that up. I'm not sure if she designed it as well. And she also, because she was on a computer, we were one of the two peoples on computers, she designed the console, the map of the world on the anti-grav platform. And so she supplied the files to the laser cutter who cut out the acrylic files. So probably why she gets the credit for graphic artist on the show. But so she was going from essentially a CAD drafts person to just recently she was a production designer for a sci-fi movie called 2067. If you're listening, just enter. I'm giving you a plug. Yeah, so we've known each other for nearly 30 years. Gone our various ways, but worked on the same movies. It's weird. So she'll have done something on it, and I'll just look up the credit and not known that she's been on it. So, so it's a small industry in Australia. But you know, the other graphic artist was a guy called Eugene Intas. Honestly, I don't know what he did on the production, but previous to that, he'd been my art director, and I'd been either his assistant art director or graphic artist under him. And he also went on to do production design for TV shows. So I think what I remember most is just working with a really talented crew on awesome sets, just fantastic, beautiful sets to walk into. The other one was the temple that burnt down. That's another anecdote. When they went to blow that up, it was just meant to be a very small explosion and then pick up shots the next day. But it was a bit of a Keystone Cops affair where the temple really blew up. The styrofoam that it was made of caught on fire.
Oh, goodness.
And left a 20-kilometre plume of black smoke over the Gold Coast. I mean, I can still picture it now, like walking out at the studio across to the location, which was about 5 or 6 kilometres away, and a huge, like a volcanic plume of black, jet black smoke, just in a huge long plume. So it had gone up, hit an air current, and just went like a straight line across to the Gold Coast. So I visited that the next day to see what the damage was. And there were all of the people who were there saying, lucky no one got killed, because the mortars that used for the explosion had actually flown away. So you're talking about huge steel pipes that the explosions come out of, had landed only feet away from the crew. And then the local fire department went to put it out, and the ends of their hoses fell off. So it was,
oh goodness,
it was a comedy situation, except very serious.
Very serious too.
Very serious too. But that was a fantastic set. Obviously, when you look at it, it looks like a temple in the wilderness, and it's just a whole lot of styrene blocks, which you can see, because at the end, Kylie is hunkered down with Chun-Li or someone, I can't remember. And you can see, as you do on Hollywood sets, all of the scenic paint stripped away, and you can see the flecks of the styrene, little white bits on the rocks. I don't know if, when you're looking at it, I see these things all the time, whether the fans see them. But when you're looking at the rocks, just look at the white flecks. It's the styrofoam underneath.
Lovely. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun going back through and looking back at some of the key visuals from Street Fighter that people really remember. And I'm grateful that you shared your time with us and these fantastic memories. yeah, definitely if you want to check out more, randyvellacott.com, as well as randwar.com, RANDWAR.com. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great. Right now it's over. It's nighttime over here. It's daytime for you. I hope you have a. Oh, are you going to show us something?
If anyone's interested, I don't know how many exist, but I don't even know how I came into possession of it. But for the fans, there you go. There's the ping pong gun.
Incredible.
I need to get that fixed up one day. It's a little worse for wear, but another little thing for the fans.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, and everybody watching, have a great rest of the convention. And Randy, I hope you have a great day.
Okay, same to you.
Thank you.
Anyone who wants to contact me on, I have an address on my websites, so if they want to email me, if they want information, I'm happy to give it. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, bye-bye.